everyone. We're here today to discuss the Portugal, Italy, and Spain. They rethink nuclear. We're here with André Feliciano from Portugal, Marc Altés and Guillem Sanchis from Econucleares, Spain, Edoardo Ventafridda and Luca Romano, Giovani Blue and L'Avvocato dell'Atomo from Italy. I'm Rodrigo, I'm from Portugal too, and I'll be moderating this session. Basically, in all these countries are anti-nuclear. Portugal never had nuclear, Spain is during a nuclear phase-out, and Italy closed its reactors since 1990. They also had a poll in 2011 to a referendum to that, according to the opinion of the public, made them not anti-nuclear. Definitively made them anti-nuclear. So I'd like to ask Italy, how is the opinion changing since 2011 about this subject?
Okay, I'll start if possible. Hi everyone, I'm Edoardo from Italy, as you said. I'm with page Giovani Blue. So we're experiencing a very interesting situation in Italy. Italy is an extremely difficult country when it comes to nuclear energy. We have people that think very differently on this topic, but we are experiencing a quite radical change in the opinions of the people. Just 2 years ago, if you happen to be saying nuclear in a room like this, I would assure you that like 90% of the room would have come silent and would have looked at you like, that's not good. But 2 years later, after the Russian-Ukraine war, so energy prices that skyrocketed, bills that skyrocketed, the public opinions on nuclear energy are shifting a lot. Me, of course, I'm part of the Gen Z, so between my peers, I can say that definitely there is much more opening. Even though it's totally different when you compare like the areas of the ages. For example, between young people, of course, they're more prone to be pro-nuclear because they like science, because they inform themselves better. Also, I think that it makes a huge difference where you take your information, because older people tend to take their information from like newspapers, TV shows, but us, young people, we like to read papers, we like to inform us online. That's actually much better in general than informing ourselves with old newspapers, you know. So yeah, we are experiencing a change in the way we are thinking about nuclear. Young people tend to be more pro-nuclear, and old people tend to be more against. Of course, this is also because they have the emotional problem of Chernobyl, but we don't have that. So yes, definitely, I'm quite optimistic. I feel like maybe we're not gonna have nuclear energy tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow, probably yes, definitely.
I don't have a lot to add. That's the situation. The information system in Italy is pretty broken, not just when it comes to nuclear, but basically about everything else. So the news outlets are pretty much politicized. You either have like the very right outlets and then very left outlets, and you already know which story they will sell you. Whatever happens, you can turn on a certain TV channel and you already know which stance they will be taking, and the other one will take the opposite stance. So when it comes to the energy transition, you have either climate deniers or like fully green, anti-nuclear, anti-GMOs, anti-everything sides on TV. But however, on social media, on like internet media, the thing is different. There are a lot of new people, young people, trying to give a different service to the public. So YouTube channels, informative Instagram or Facebook pages, I include myself among those, and this is changing the discourse in Italy. So the young people who tend to inform themselves more on the internet, they actually are changing their opinion. And the most recent polls, 51% of Italians are either pro-nuclear or at least mildly open to that, while 26% are absolutely against it and 24% are undecided. But if you look at the different ages, the below 35 years old group is 63% in favor. So there is a huge age gap on this.
In Spain, you also have nuclear power plants. You're during a nuclear phase out. I'd like to know more about how you started the nuclear power plants and more about the anti-nuclear movement right now in Spain and how it is progressing to close the power plants you already built.
Right, so currently, so just for context for people, I hope you can hear me well because, yeah, I know, I'll try to speak as close to the microphone as I can. So just for context for people, Spain does have nuclear power. We have 7 reactors on 5 locations, which currently provide 20% of our grid, 1 of every 5 light bulbs. However, the current plan is to phase them out, turn them off during the next decade, up to 2035. That's where the current plan of closing them down. This is the situation. Where the anti-nuclear movement in Spain comes from, well, it's, I think, a parallel, a lot of points in common with a lot of with all of us today, right? So, you know, the Cold War, the Chernobyl, all of that. There is specific points about Spain that we can, I'm sure, we'll touch on in a minute or later. But the trend is also similar. So, you know, the arc is pretty similar. We have the anti-nuclear from the 80s. We stopped building reactors at the point where we were amongst the nations in Europe, actually, where we had the most per capita. We were also among the first in Europe to implement nuclear power, nuclear energy. We had a moratorium in place for a few years, from the 80s through the 90s. We stopped building, including power plants nearly finished. That was eventually taken away, but we have, of course, not built since, and we're now looking at closing them down.
Would you like to add anything?
No, that the situation finally is very similar that the situation that have in Italy and recently with the gas crisis and the energetic rise, the public opinion start to change a little bit, yeah. But in the political sector, not. The situation are the same.
I also know that in Portugal, in the 70s, you planned on building a nuclear reactor, but it was stopped due to the local opinion of the people inside the town where it would be built. In 2006, there was another attempt to build a nuclear reactor, but unsuccessful. I'd like to know more about why it was unsuccessful and how did the anti-nuclear movement win in both those places.
So those two occasions are very different one from the other. So the first one was in the 70s, and we had like this authoritarian guy within the country, and so they stopped the guy got out of power, and the project sticked associated with the authoritarian party still. So the people got out from their houses and went for the anti-nuclear protests next to the place where they were building the nuclear plant. So there was the query anti-nuclear movement that made Portugal fall in the back of the nuclear race or of the 70s and 80s. After that, we talked about the 2006, where there was legislation trying to pass, and they made some investigations on where to put the plant, but the state has since changed the rules, so it made it harder to implement the power plant. So the project basically failed because of that. On another topic, how does the public look at it? We have this anti-nuclear tendency, but in reality, no one really talks about it. It is taboo. And one of our purposes here is to bring the nuclear energy topic to the table, because we talk about renewables all the time. And what do we have there? We have wind, solar, and hydro. And nobody talks about nuclear. And we believe that in the process of decarbonization, it is fundamental to take nuclear energy into consideration. And we want to make this possible in Portugal, to have this discussion, a real discussion on the pros and cons of nuclear energy and how to implement it. And that's it.
So clearly, every one of these countries is anti-nuclear. Italy is changing more, but the other ones stayed the same, or even worse, maybe. I'd like to know, why do you think this is? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a misinformation? What do you think about it? Let's start with Italy.
Okay. So as I said before, Italy is a very difficult country when it comes to nuclear energy. One thing that I always say is that the literacy score, scientific literacy score in Italy is extremely low, like compared to the other OECD countries. If you look at the actual graph, Italy, I don't remember if it's like the third last one, but it's in between the last one. So scientific literacy in Italy is very low. And this means that people don't understand the difference, for example, between risk and danger. They don't understand the orders of magnitude. And that may mean that also, if you want to approach a complicated topic as nuclear energy, of course there's going to be a big amount of people that don't even know they don't even know math, basic math. And this doesn't apply to just to normal people, but also to journalists, well, specifically to journalists in our case, all TV people, and all around the country we have this big problem of scientific literacy. One thing that I always say also is that why do we have this problem with nuclear energy? Why are we here debating about nuclear energy? I think the reason is one, and it's not the safety, it's not the waste, this comes later. I think the first reason is that nuclear energy is difficult to understand. Who here knows what wind is? Everyone experienced wind on his face, right? Everyone drinks water. I think everyone here drinks water. Everyone here cooks or, I hope no, but maybe smokes cigarettes. So all the other energy sources are very familiar to us. But who can say to have seen a nuclear fission? I don't think that anyone here has ever seen a nuclear fission, unfortunately. So I think that's really the problem. So nuclear energy must be understood, must be studied to be understood. But if you have a country that doesn't even know that 2 + 2 is 4 and not 5, it's kind of complicated. So that's why I think that, we are working on it. We're really working on it. Public opinion, as I said before, is slowly changing, but there's still a lot of work to do.
So in Italy, it's mostly misinformation. What do you think, Spain?
Well, I'm sure it's also a big part. But just to expand on a couple Spain-specific points, right? Which is that similar to Portugal, I think. I'm not entirely familiar with the dates, but we had, of course, a military dictatorship for a few decades in the 20th century, right? So from 1939 to 1975, Spain was a military dictatorship, and there was a lot of infrastructure expanding in that time, including energy projects. We're talking hydroelectric and also, of course, nuclear. And of course, in such a political system, the expansion of the infrastructure is not done in a democratic public consultation way. So, if someone said, move this village, we will flood it to make hydroelectric, we'll put all these people over there, then, you don't particularly go around asking who's okay with that. And the same happened with nuclear power. What that meant, unfortunately, is that projects like nuclear power were associated with, authoritarian governments, with this kind of procedure. So once we transitioned to democracy, that association stayed there. So riding together with a green wave of nuclear is bad, again some accidents, was that association specifically in Spain with authoritarian big infrastructure that was tied to nuclear.
Yeah, only to expand this information. No, for example, you talk about a nuclear power plant that was built, but the government don't start. No, that was Lemoniz in the Basque country. But the reason, that for example this power plant have a lot of problems was, for example, they have some terrorist attacks in the construction. But the reasons was a mix, of the anti-nuclear movement, and that this nuclear power plant become a symbol of the Spanish government, a symbol of a imposition, because in their times, in in the Basque country exists a very strong separatist movement, and all these things are was mixed. And another point was that finally the government, the socialist government, no, have the decision to close all the reactors that was creating in the 80s, no. And another point that I need to put in this is that the socialist says in his moment, no, that the future not was nuclear. The future was coal. Yeah, because in their moment, the socialists have a lot of votes of the miners of Asturias that they extract a lot of coal. This is the problem. Not was a technical decision. Was all a political issue.
So in Spain, it was mostly due to public opinion that the anti-nuclear movement formed. What about Portugal?
In Portugal, there's this funny thing that is, we do exercises in school to think about how solar works. We may think about how wind works. We talk about it. We see in the books everywhere, but we never hear about nuclear in the school. And or if we hear, it's about the disasters that happened. And this is a perspective that can't make us understand the science vigorously. We need to step away from the accidents and get back to what are the advantages also. Like, talk about both in respectful ways and then make an informed decision. But we don't get that chance, basically, because there's not much going around about nuclear. Like, the last time nuclear was in the news was when a plant in Spain opened, Almaraz, and when it opened, there was like some people in Portugal that were upset about it and made a small movement, and the news media covered that. But after that, and it was like years ago, ever since, we have just stopped talking about it. And like, the politicians don't have an opinion formed on it, and we need to get it ready to discuss it publicly again.
So, in a country so clearly anti-nuclear, does anyone talk about the fact that since Portugal imports so much energy from Spain, does anyone talk about Portugal having nuclear energy because Spain has nuclear energy?
Yes, so there's this very funny thing that is, a short time ago we were able to make 6 days out of renewables, wind, solar and hydropower, okay? Now, if you know, 1 year has 365 days, so for the rest of the days we needed some other source. What were those other sources? It was gas and Spain. Spain happens to have a big percentage from nuclear. And so, actually, we get like 5% of our energy in Portugal, of our electricity, comes from nuclear energy, even though we have no reactor and no power plant working. And that's just a funny fact that sustains our grid without blackouts and gives us the security we love to have in Portugal, to turn on the lights at night, and it's working, and it's powerful, and it's great. We should keep nuclear and increase the nuclear in Portugal.
Italy also doesn't have nuclear since 1990, as I said, but has a big industry in that. I'd like to know more about what do you think about Italy having such a big impact in the nuclear industry, but not having this power source?
Well, it all starts with a little bit of a backstory. The very first atomic fission happened in Italy, in Rome, in 1934. Was discovered by a research group called the Boys of Via Panisperna, which was led by Enrico Fermi. Of course, back then they didn't know they split the atom. It was a German woman named Lise Meitner who was able to correctly realize it, like to correctly read the data. But a few years later, the same Enrico Fermi in the United States started the first atomic fission chain reaction in Chicago, as we all know. So the nuclear reactor is an Italian invention. In the 60s, Italy started its atomic program, and it was one of the most advanced in the world. We were the first country who was able to build 3 reactors of 3 different types, and the reactor, the first pressurized Italian water reactor, was the biggest in the world back then, and engineers were coming to Italy to study the reactor, copy the project, and replicate it in their country. There are running power plants that are carbon copy of an Italian nuclear power plant that is now closed. Now, this has not ceased when Italy phased out nuclear. Italian nuclear science is still the best in the world, one of the best in the world. The director of the biggest nuclear engineering research project, which is ITER, the fusion project, is Italian. His name is Pietro Barabaschi. The director of the biggest nuclear physics lab in the world, which is the CERN at Geneva, where the Large Hadron Collider is hosted, is an Italian woman named Fabiola Gianotti. The pumps of the primary cooling circuit of the French EPR is made in Italy. The steam generators of the French and American reactors are made also in Italy. The section of the tokamak of ITER is made in Italy and in Korea. Like Italy and Korea are the only 2 countries that are able to make that grade of components. Italian precision engineering industry is the 2nd largest in Italy. The first one is pharmaceutical, but all the government cares about is the food and wine industry, agriculture. And so Italy has always had the highest grade of nuclear engineering. We still graduate more nuclear engineer per million inhabitants than any other country in Europe but France. So the question is not why are we so good at nuclear engineering. We have always been. Nuclear engineering is our thing. The reason is why don't we have nuclear power? And the reason is that after Chernobyl, a bunch of politicians decided to capitalize on people's fear and trade away all of this, because now all the nuclear engineers we graduate, they go working abroad. They decided to trade away all of this. They decided to kill our energy security. We import 15% of our electricity. They decided to kill our industry. Our companies pay the highest electricity bill in Europe for a bunch of votes. They traded all of this for a bunch of votes, for a shorter political gain. So the reason why we don't have nuclear power is because our politicians are disgusting.
So, yeah. I also know that Spain has a lot of industry, despite it going to shut down, the power plant to shut down. Do you think this phase out will affect the nuclear industry in Spain, and if so, how much?
Right, so similar to the Italian case, Spain, in addition to having nuclear power, also has a vibrant nuclear engineering industry. As I said, we're among the first nations in Europe to have nuclear power, and we still do, to this day, manufacture a lot of components. I think we manufacture also steam generators, for instance. We have some heavy forging. We manufacture fuel, from the enriched uranium onto the fuel elements, both for our own plants, we cover all our demand, and to export various kinds. We're looking now into, for instance, I think, including here in the Emirates, also Eastern Europe, replacing Russian supplied fuel elements. So that is to say, we have a very powerful, especially for the size of the country, nuclear engineering industry. The reason I bring this up, of course, is that if we do phase out nuclear power, then it also has an impact on that. So it's not only the primary effect on energy security, emissions, prices, etc. It is also a secondary effect on this industry, meaning all the labor effect it has and all the effect in gross national product. So obviously, if there wasn't enough of a reason with the other factors, this is also a very important effect to take into account.
I think that this phase out affect to the nuclear Spanish industry, but not end with this, because for example ENUSA, I think that maybe more than the half of their contracts are with another countries that are Spain, because we export a lot of fuel and a lot of technology. The same with steam generators. Spain not built nuclear power plants since the 80s, but we have factories that produce steam generators that goes around the world. So, yeah, I think that in the worst case that we close all the nuclear power plants, the nuclear industry we will be stay alive. Yeah.
So, if you during the nuclear phase out, if the industry goes down a bit, how do you think that it would affect internationally the rest of Europe and other companies of power plants?
I think that some time ago the nuclear industry are working to expand their international weight, because they suppose that in the future can be this phase out, no? Also, it's true that this situation is bad in general for on the Spanish industry, and will be affect to the suppliers, no, to the other countries that buy our products, especially if the government try to do more to complicate, no, the nuclear sector. Because, for example, our government not only is want to close the nuclear power plants. Also, for example, forbid impossibilitate the extraction of uranium in Spain, because in Spain we have uranium and it's economical. But the anti-nuclear government do all the things that can to do the maximum injurious in this sector.
I have this question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
How would it affect the jobs, and how are the unions talking about it? What the phase out in Spain? How is it going on? How do they feel? What are they thinking? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, we always talk about the energy problems with the phase out, but only exists a very high problem with the social. We lost a lot of jobs that thousands of jobs that are very good jobs, no, and this is also a very big problem. And I think that the one of another problems that we have is that, for example, the what you say, the sindicatos, the unions are not fighting to prevent this phase out, are like surrender. And I think that is our job to try to organize and put all the energy that was necessary to change the situation. We need to start to walk for lightly start to run.
Okay. So, as he said, closing down the nuclear power plants shuts down a lot of jobs. How is that seen in the political side of things? Because the left parties normally care more about the jobs, but they're normally against nuclear. How is it seen from the right parties and the left parties in Spain?
Yeah, no, they don't care. So, and actually, I think this is a very good point, and one that we do not utilize as much as we should, which is, let me go back. So obviously, energy security, energy independence, or autonomy should not be a political matter, right? That's important for everyone. However, these topics tend to appeal more, for whatever reason, to conservative, right wing, call it whatever you want. However, there is an underutilized angle, I think, which is more appealing to naturally to the left side, left wing a progressive labor kind of thing, which is of course the labor angle. Nuclear power, nuclear energy, and the whole industry behind it provides a lot. I'm talking thousands directly for a nuclear power plant, plus all the secondary jobs, so jobs, right? So I'm talking highly qualified employment, long-term employment, a huge tax base for the town it is. So therefore, all the positive economics to that region, which is another yet aspect that we don't really discuss as much of the nuclear phase-out, which is the devastating effect this has on the town and the wider region it is. And this is not theoretical. We've seen it in examples like Indian Point in New York, for instance, when where the town, I think it was like 50% of the tax base of the small town it was next to was provided by the nuclear power plant. So obviously the second that's gone, that's a devastating impact. So there's the tax base, there's the labor, there's a series of aspects that we would do well to bring up more often to appeal to that labor left wing demographic and parties and that kind of thing.
In Italy, it is also in Italy, you also have if you build a lot of nuclear power plants, you build a lot of jobs. How is it seen in the political party in your country, and how would you like it to be like?
In a sense where human behavior is very important and it's very
Political parties do not care. In Italy, creating jobs not a priority. It is preserving the current ones. Italian politicians, both left and right, do not care about advancing the country. They only care about preserving what we have and make sure we don't fall more, which is of course the best method to fall. Like, Italy is slowly declining, and all politicians care about is to not decline too much while they are in power, and then pass it on to the next government. They don't want to relaunch Italy. They don't want to bolster economic growth because it's unpopular. You have to understand that in Italy there is a lot of people who don't want to adapt to new technologies. There is a part of Italy where it was really frowned upon when electronic payment were made mandatory by the government, because they don't want to use credit cards, and they avoid it if they can. So to advance Italy on a technological level is something that is frowned upon in many parts of the country. And politicians do not care about explaining why it's important. They only care about capitalizing on the vote of those people, because the short-term political gain in Italy is very important, because the political system is extremely unstable. We have government changes much more rapidly than we do have election cycle. So it's true, no government ever lasted the whole election cycle in Italy since we have the Republic since 1948 after the fascism. So there is politicians are always they always aim at the short-term gain, and this cannot bolster economic growth. They cannot bolster technological advancement. There is very little political incentive in Italy for nuclear, because it's something that you build, and the next government or two next governments will benefit from it in the polls, and which is why politicians do not care about creating new jobs in this sector, because it's much easier to just subsidize the people who are unemployed, give them like free money by raising our debts and leveraging with the European Commission to get allowances to make more public debt, and as soon as the situation is dangerous, they pass it on to the next government, which will try to negotiate with the European Commission a little more. That's how it works in Italy.
Yeah. So in Portugal, what do you think about it? Is it the same as Italy? Is it more like Spain? Yeah.
When it comes to the jobs, you mean?
When it comes to the jobs, when it comes to the votes, like the short-term gains that the politicians want, a decision. Yeah.
Okay, from the jobs perspective, nobody talks about it, and again, and we keep on this. But on that side of the long-term thinking, I think that we really need to change minds. So we need to go from short-term thinking, 3 to 4 years, from like solar and wind farms that can be built, but deliver very low energy, very low quality energy even, and intermittent energy. That's like one of the hardest things, is that if the sun doesn't shine, if the wind doesn't blow, we don't have that much energy left from our hydro storage. It is quite limited, and we need to get it done. We have some pumping that was implemented almost during the authoritarian times, but it has not grown ever since, and we need to make it better. And keep thinking about the long term, and get over a bit of the fear of nuclear, and get into what I meet in the streets nowadays, that is the curiosity about nuclear. Like, what about nuclear? What's there? What can it do? What can it do better than the others? What is not that good at? And how can we fix this energy thing?
So you talked about the short-term gains of votes in Italy, also in Portugal. What about Spain? Is it mostly to gain votes in a short-term period? Do they have any plans for a long-term future?
No. So, no, they do, and it's hilarious. So, the current energy plan in Spain, right? The PN, and it doesn't matter. The integrated. Yeah, that one. So the integrated energy and climate plan. Yeah, the one that says we will shut down, phase out our nuclear power plants before 2035. It has, if anyone is interested, it's PN. Oh man. PNIEC Annex A2. There's a table. That table, the one that says nuclear goes to zero, also says, for instance, of course, it says gas stays the same, so there the priorities are clear. But it also says, for instance, in terms of installed capacity, all the solar that Spain built, like since we started building solar, take that, multiply it by 7, and build it in the next decade. Therefore, completely impossible. There's no land, there's no time, there's no labor, there's no steel to do any of that. So, of course, the real plan is to keep burning gas, import even more, and depend on the international market while we shut down the nuclear. The only reason is ideologic. There's no other obviously there's no technical reason other than that.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone likes to add something, we have time for questions. I don't know if anyone...
I would like to add one thing about the PNIEC. So Spain and Portugal have all talked about this plan of the energy for the next 10, 20 years. And what has Portugal invested in? It was in the connections to the other countries to import energy. And this is like, we want it from you. Keep those nuclear power plants on, please.
Oh, that happens everywhere. If you see, it happens in North America, it happens in Europe as well. So everyone, as part of their supply, counts the next country over. Obviously, there's a very clear problem the day the wind doesn't blow or anything like that. And it happens everywhere. So since they managed to do their own plans, everyone counts the neighbor as a source. There's an obvious downside to this.
Yeah, and since we're talking about neighbors have to be next to each other, right? So when the sun doesn't shine in one country, it also doesn't shine in the other country. When the wind doesn't blow in one country, it also doesn't blow in the other. So the difference really stands in the nuclear energy and in the gas that you're using more than we have it. Actually.
But in this situation that we don't have wind and solar, we have the French connection that is nuclear. And it always works.
Yeah, but Portugal is too far away from France, sadly. That's about it.
No, actually, I have a very dumb question I wanted to ask you since you're from Portugal. I read somewhere that you were working on these extremely dumb designs of big bowls that floats in the ocean that are like as big as houses. And they go up and down and produce no electricity at all and cost so much. Are you still working on that, or it's so dumb?
Do you mean about the ways to produce energy from offshore waves?
Yes, but it's I don't know if you wanted to.
So I believe that some people try to do that, but have you heard of salty water? It is a great way to corrode all the metal you use. So a lot of those projects of offshore have been shut down because the materials they used for building those plants corroded and got basically useless and did not produce enough energy to be rentable and be profitable.
I just wanted to add something about Italy. I know I painted a very grim picture of my country, a political class that it's interested only in the short-term gain, a corrupted media system, and an uneducated population. But the thing is, I'm not a pessimist. In fact, things are changing. It's just not very visible right now. The younger generations, starting from mine and like younger than me, they have a much better grasp at reality. They realize that the current system isn't working. They realize that there is an intergenerational crime going on, not just when it comes to climate, but also about other issues such as like pensions and stuff and other stuff. And they are doing something. It's just not very visible yet, because it takes some time to replace all the people in the positions of power, and they are defending their positions. So the same faces in TV faces on TV are the same in the last 30 years. There was not a single change. Like, you can turn the TV on in the 90s and now you will see the same journalists conducting the same news channels. And sometimes they rotate over just to pretend that something is happening, but they're always the same. But the younger generation is rising. The younger people are not watching TV anymore. There are some very serious BBC-style news channels on YouTube now, on Twitch. I cooperate with some of them. They get their news from there is a better YouTube reporting in Italy about the situation in Iran, in Palestine, in Ukraine, than it is on the national TV channels. So I think at some point this will explode and it will flow out and take over, and it will be happening. I don't know exactly when, maybe in the last 10 years, maybe 15, but it will be happening. And when it will happen, it will bring with itself this revolution, this sort of peaceful revolution, this generational takeover, will bring itself nuclear and GMOs and a lot of innovations. I'm very hopeful for our country, but right now it's just like the night is darker just before the dawn.
Yeah, I hope advocates help all around the world, not only in Italy. I don't know if you wanted to add something, Guillem. Okay?
No problem. I'd rather go to some audience questions with the time we have.
There's not a lot of people, but if anyone has a question.
I think I think one thing to say, no? But wait a moment.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. It's coming.
Right. Speaking on that project, we spoke about the. Oh, you have the. Oh, perfect. I like that. You take it.
Some hours ago, I went to the Spanish pavilion in the blue zone.
Yeah.
In there, they have this. Spain. Spain. 4 years towards just energy transition. So a summary of the energetic situation of Spain. And you can see, first, in the index, we only have one part that talks about nuclear power. And the first thing that, and another thing that you say is this part is inside the coal sector in Spain. The coal sector in Spain. This is the first problem. When you go to the nuclear part of the document, is this. Only this. more than the 20% of the electricity of the Spain that is produced by nuclear, and in the next years, our country plans to phase out all the nuclear power plants, is only this. And what say? Talk about the phase out of Zorita and Garoña, that are two power plants that are close now. And only this. Not say anything more. We have a very, very big problem with our government that don't accept the reality.
There are not a lot of people now, but
We have not talked about fourth generation. Is there any different approach to fourth generation nuclear, like, let's say, for instance, thorium molten salt or something like that?
One thing that I can say about that is that Portugal has a small grid, and so there's a chance that we may use SMRs, small modular reactors, which is the fourth generation in part, and
Some SMRs are third generation.
about like we will need probably to use SMRs with storage, but maybe if Luca Command wants to complement the topic.
well, this panel is about the situation in Italy, Spain, and Portugal. You can have different models of fourth generation reactors. There is an Italian startup which is developing a lead-cooled generation reactor, but not for the Italian market because nuclear is not legal in Italy right now. People tends to be more positive towards the fourth generation, the public in general, but it's actually mild. There are not a lot of people who would change their mind based on the reactor generation. And for the purpose of this panel, it doesn't make a lot of difference. Now, if you want to delve into different nuclear technologies, there are other panels for that, and I myself am available to discuss it with you. But let's say that at the moment, fourth generation is developing, not on the market yet. When it will be, we will see. It will depend from the cost, the price that they are able to sell the energy for, and a lot of other things. For example, fast reactor with metal cooling, liquid metal cooling requires reprocessing, and reprocessing is difficult from from the point of view of international regulations because it opens the door for proliferation, which is why Nucleo is working with France, which already has a reprocessing industry. Other types of nuclear reactor have other concerns. Certain types of nuclear reactors are not adapted to certain sizes. Of course, Italy is the third largest energy consumer in Europe, so they need a certain reactor size. They cannot go with like just SMRs. It would be too little for Italy. So also, to be honest, Italian politicians do not even have the difference in their mind between, they don't even know the difference between SMR, fourth generation, and nuclear fusion. Okay, I had to explain to a number of them personally the difference. So it's not really a matter of political discussion in Italy, the fourth generation. I'm available for further discussion if you want later.
We in Spain have a situation that will be very interesting to use. Not fourth generation, that SMR reactors, and is for the Canary Islands, because we have Canary Islands that are very, very far near to Africa, and they actually burns oil. Is their principal source of energy, and have a very big problem. And for their position and location and energy consumption, use SMR is a perfect solution for the situation. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you for the explanation. Was quite interesting. Do you foresee, for example, if any of your countries, Italy, Portugal, Spain, is going to have a kind of political revolution and they decide to relaunch or restart the nuclear program? Do you think the other countries are going to follow this? or is something like is going to be unique?
I will speak for Italy. Italy is a country that is already prone to follow other countries. In the Italian political debate, the best argument for not having nuclear is Germany is closing nuclear. We tend to have this fascination with Germany. It occurs in history several times. So I believe that once other countries, like the biggest pro-nuclear front grows between European countries, the sooner Italy will jump the line. And because we have also this historical tendency to, jump the fence and stay with the winning party, shifting from one side to the other. So I do believe that if Spain, for example, decides to not shut down their nuclear plants, this will affect heavily the public debate in Italy. When Belgium decided to not shut down all their nuclear plants, they will save at least 2 of them. We are hoping for all 5 of them, of the remaining ones. It caused a shift in Italy. And right now, the fact that Germany and Austria are more and more isolated in the anti-nuclear front, because Denmark is also reconsidering, as we learned before, Norway is considering, as we learned before. Now maybe Spain will be reconsidering. Like the anti-nuclear front is shrinking and the pro-nuclear front is growing. So eventually Italy will jump the fence and switch side.
I have something to add. That is basically, so Portugal was this groundbreaking country that went all around the world. It's the story we are told in schools. But ever since that time, we are not really into being the first out there. But with these new constructions and the pledge to triple power signed by 22 countries, and new plants being built and get into the grid, just like here in the United Arab Emirates, and also in Poland. Poland yesterday just set out publicly that they will be building nuclear power plants, 2 big ones and 24 small modular reactors. And as soon as we see how that works out, I believe that Portugal will be much proner to get into it. It will be much easier because we will have an example. Because one of the narratives that is used against nuclear in Portugal is that it takes too long to build and too long to get into the grid. But if the countries in Poland, like Poland, can get it to work and make a just transition to end the carbonization of their electricity power grid, we believe that Portugal will try to follow the good examples of the carbonization. That's what I believe.
For the people that says that nuclear is too slow to fight in the transition, I remember that the only country that do a revolution in their decarbonization in a record time was France. In 50 years, they change with nuclear. They have 70% of their electricity. This argument is very, very weak.
Yeah, just to add to that, because in one of the screens outside, and maybe here, if I get lucky, there's a chart of the fastest decarbonization efforts in history, and not yet. Well, it will come up. Most of them are hydro. If the geography is lucky, Sweden, stuff like that, or they are nuclear. France, historically, of course, also Sweden at the time, or this example right here in UAE, right, the Baraka plant, 20 years to construct. I believe this century.
12.
So 20 years, the whole project, right, to construct something like exactly. Believe they did the most decarbonization this century, by per capita just with this. It will come up eventually. I'll point it out. Questions?
Yeah, does anyone have another question?
We have some more minutes.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know if you want to add something. If not, thanks for having us. Yeah, and if you have anything you want to talk about, we'll be here around for some time. Thank you.